Hi, everybody. Welcome to another amazing panel brought to you as a co-production by QueerVox and the Halp Network. Thank you so much to all of the folks at the Halp Network for helping us to put together this panel and so many others. I'm JP Karliak. I am the founder of QueerVox, which is a learning community for LGBTQIA plus voice actors. We offer classes, we do panels, we also offer EDI training for companies, agencies, kind of whatever, in an effort to make sure that the rising number of queer characters that are happening in our industry, both in animation and interactive and across the board, are being authentically cast, and that our queer and trans siblings are getting the opportunities that they deserve. So that's what we do. Visit us at queervox.org. About a month and a half ago or so, Kaylee Mckee, who is a member of the Discord at QueerVox, approached me with the idea for this panel, and I absolutely loved it. This is the first time a member has just pitched a panel, and I'm so glad that we could do one. So I'm going to throw it over to Kaylee to tell us about the genesis of this panel and to introduce herself.
Sure. I definitely want to introduce all of us first, and then I'll launch into it. So I'm Kaylee Mckee. I'm a voice actress known for things like Beastars and Hearthstone, Genshin Impact, and some other things that are coming out soon that I'm excited to talk about. And I really value helping folks like navigate this industry, and I want to leave more space than I take, like as I move through the industry. And that's super, super important to me. And that's the reason that I wanted to put this together, especially knowing a few folks who have really, really good things to say about the subject. So that's me. And guess we can go down the line here. Like, if Kaden, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. I'm Kaden Jensen. I'm a voice talent. You might have heard me in Ruby or in The Titan's Bride or Red versus Blue. But my day job, I work as a writer, director, producer at Rooster Teeth. And a little bit of that involves doing some casting as well. So I try to take as much time as I can to learn as I teach, because there's so much that even I don't know about everything. So there's a lot of moments where it's time for me to sit and listen. And I'm happy to be here with everybody and share what I know and learn some things I might not.
Awesome.
Am I next? Am I
Yeah.
next? This? Okay,
Go
cool.
for it.
It's you.
Hi, I'm Anjali. I'm an actor. I'm a writer. I freelance cast on occasion. I am also a trans person trying to make their way through this industry, and so have experiences to share in that regard. But like the others have said, also really excited to hear from everyone else here and learn from it, because there is quite a lot that I think even as a queer or trans person we can learn from each other. So yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. Cool. Let's throw it to Calvin.
Sure. Hi, I'm Calvin Joyal. I'm a voice actor as well. I think most people would know me if they know me from Warframe or Blush Blush and other things that I wish I could talk about, but I can't yet. Love that. But yeah, I'm the one Canadian voice actor here, I think. So I'm excited to hear everyone else's perspectives that I don't have as well, like everyone said. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Calvin. And finishing it off, Sam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Frishman. I am a voiceover animation agent at CESD, and I get to rep some of the people on this panel and meeting some others for the first time, and excited to hear some stories and see what people have gone through and learned, because it's really important for me. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. And now, Kaylee, sorry, I went out of order. Now I'm going to throw it to you to talk about the impetus of the panel.
Of course, it's no problem. The crux of this panel today is taking a look at as many corners of the industry as we can. Like, as you've heard going down this list and speak to them in relation to navigating those spaces as queer talent and the industry relationships that are at the heart of that navigation, especially with like a focus on more marginalized queer folks, some problems that are encountered, and some solutions, and what we encourage you to do for yourself and potential roadblocks and caution points you should be aware of as well. We're going to cover many things, like I said, but the first thing I want to speak on that will have like through threads through much of this panel is if you want to make the choice of being part of the process of changing things. You do not have to, not everyone has the energy to, but if you can, I highly recommend playing an active role in speaking up where you see problems. Not only will you help create progress for everyone, but honestly, you'll be helping yourself. It can seem scary, but so many of us are behind you, not just in the queer community, but like with allies that want to hear from you and want to help. It's not overstepping to point out an issue regarding something that you know a lot about, that is a part of your identity, and other folks do not, like when it comes to queer representation. For instance, if you see a problem that stems from ignorance and you approach respectfully and with compassion when you can, and usually you can, that can build rapport with the folks that you're speaking with. A project actually came out last week that I created change in that way, all the way to like their team for the project in Japan. Like it got back to them. It was a project where they were casting a trans woman character, but the character was, let's just say, not great. Very stereotypical, very lots of red flags. And I could have just auditioned and been like, oh, well, that's how it is, and sent it in. But I felt like I needed to speak up about it. And I did. And actually, a couple of agents at CESD helped me forward it to the team here in America, the casting team, and then they forwarded it to Japan. And they helped me along the way, and we talked, and those folks in Japan actually heard what I had to say, got back to us, said, we did what we could for right now. We can't change the characters like look, which was a big sticking point for me. So we're just going to make them a man for now, which is telling that they could just say, oh, that's a guy instead of a trans woman. That's telling. That's, you can imagine what this character looked like. But we will think about this in the future and pay much closer attention. Thank you. We didn't know this stuff. And that is really, you know, I felt like I needed to do that. And like, here's the thing. Was the change they made perfect? No. For whatever reason or another, it didn't turn out the way I would have wanted. You know, they had already produced the project, really, so they couldn't scrap that much and go back. I would have wanted to play the character if they were able to do some fixes, but what it did do is get them thinking about these things and saying they will do better next time. And not only that, but the casting team, the localization team, even them in Japan, now know me as someone who wants to help and is not afraid to have these conversations. And like the fear of non-queer industry folks regarding us is something that we can get back to later. We definitely want to mention that. But it was a chance to work with agents who represent me as well, and these teams in getting their help and building that working relationship and improve their knowledge. And a friend of ours, Melly Grant, actually does this a lot too, particularly with like localization. She'll talk to directors and helping fill gaps in their knowledge, and doing these things might not always swing 100, but trying has a much more net positive than not, I would say. That's mostly the first thing that I wanted to talk about. It is just, don't be afraid of being an active part of this learning process. You can be that, and I think you will be stronger for it, both for yourself and in your career, honestly. And then going back to like the fear of speaking up, I know you folks in the panel are generally of a similar mind to me on this, but what do you think of like the the troublemaker reputation and the fear that some people have of speaking up and like how to handle it. What do folks, do you have any like thoughts on that?
Who wants to go first?
Somebody go first. We're all too polite.
Since you asked Calvin, it's you.
Oh God.
You go.
You spoke up first.
Fool that I am. No. Yeah, no, it's a genuine concern. Like you said, I'm pretty sure all of us on this panel, all of us actors have experienced that. Recently, I actually had something like that come up. It wasn't related to me being trans, but me being part Indigenous, which was with the casting of the show Shaman King. And it had been something I'd had eyes on because it is the only instance I have ever seen of an Indigenous character in anime. It's the only one ever. And so I was like, okay, I wonder what they're going to do with this. And sure enough, they cast the white actor who'd played him back in the early 2000s. And I had that moment of like, well, I want to say something about this because this is something that happens a lot and that isn't good. And it could have been an amazing opportunity for some Indigenous actors to get into the industry, which there's a sore lack of them. But I had that thought of, okay, well, if I say that, there are people who might look at that and be like, oh, well, you're trying to start a problem. You're trying to get somebody else in trouble. Like that sort of, you're doing this out of vindictiveness idea instead of I'm doing this because it's a frustrating thing that has been happening constantly. And yeah, like it's a genuine fear, but I talked it over with some friends of mine who have talked out about things like this before, and the pros definitely outweigh the cons, I'd say, because until I had said something about it, yeah, like I didn't see anyone else say anything about it, and then once I did, I saw a bunch more people open up about them also feeling uncomfortable about it, and it opened that door for conversation, and that's what it can lead to in my experience, and I think that's really important.
Yeah. Do any of us have any experience with like, have we heard of anybody really being blacklisted by anybody for just saying, hey, this is not great, we should talk about this? Because personally, I don't think it happens as much as some people might, especially non-queer people might fear that it will happen. And if you talk to some friends who are not queer, sometimes they'll be like, maybe you should not because this might get you blacklisted. I'm not sure has anybody ever seen that happening?
I mean, I can say from the agency side of things, we don't have anyone on our roster who like, oh, well, that person's, a troublemaker and always, questioning, morality. So probably don't want to put them on a project. That's not something we experience or have seen. No.
And
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think I understand the fear. Like, it's one of those things where, while I agree it's very much pros, cons, at that point you have to figure out, what is the best course of action there. I think the fear is very understandable because you wouldn't necessarily know. And I think this goes beyond our industry, but in general, the fear of not knowing how your identity impacts the way people view you, but also the way people then treat you and act around you when you're not in the room, and how that can hurt your job opportunities, like a year down the road, 5 years down the road, that you have no access to seeing. Like, you can't see it in real time how it's hurting you. So I can understand that fear. And I think that I think we have sort of a responsibility to, in some way, address that and like come to terms with that, with the fact that that's, a grounded fear. But yeah, I think ultimately thinking about how we push the needle forward and make change, that really only comes from talking about the problem and trying to start a conversation to fix it. So
I think that's the important part too, that a lot of people like run away with. It's like you see yourself as causing trouble, but it's really about the framework around what you're talking. If you know what you're talking about and you're trying to bring attention to it, then really you're just starting the conversation. You're not there to like ruffle any feathers or, you know, cause any like issues or anything like that. It's a very simple, you know, bringing to the table is like, hey, this is already happening. It kind of sucks. Not really like super mad at anybody. Just want you to know for future reference, you could do this. Offering suggestions is probably like the biggest thing, like as far as like the business side of everything is concerned. If you come at something and it's like, hey, that's a problem, and then you end the conversation there, you didn't really help anybody. It's like, come to that problem with like, here's some ways that you can address this. Here's some ways that you can do better next time. And everyone will want to do better next time because they don't like, you know, like feeling inadequate in those situations either. They want to know more and they want to have more tools of the trade in their own belt because that means that they have a better product at the end anyway. And the better product gets people talking. And when people start talking, then more people are watching or playing.
Yeah. And like, obviously, we need to, you know, as far as the fear speaking out and how some of that is grounded, I think it's important to like, not just, you know, try and be mad every time you see a problem all the time and you know, like shout about it, although definitely warranted sometimes. I will say it has its place, but yeah, like really looking internally and saying like, at least for me, when I look at doing this, I say, how do I bring this up? Is it something that needs to be brought up? And what is the method that I should bring it up that will be most effective? You know, if I don't think it'll be effective to message the director directly to have a private conversation, which sometimes that is the case, then maybe I will go through a different channel, talk to somebody else, and then get them to get the director roped in, or a very polite, you know, post on the public, maybe even sometimes to just see where I'm at and make sure that the community is where I'm at as well. That can be really important and really good. And trying to, like Kaden said, like, especially being like, I don't think you're a terrible person, but this is an issue because it is a human instinct to get defensive. And I will not shy away from the fact that I've had a few people, you know, respond initially with being defensive. And that can be scary, but it's a natural human reaction that many people try to not have and they work on it. But when you do encounter it, being patient and understanding they'll get over this initial instinct in a moment and say, look, I'm here to help. I want you to improve this for you and for us. I think is very important.
Cool. I would love if we could get into some specifics of the things that you have had to advocate for, whether for yourself or for others, to kind of give some context as to what the advocacy is that is required in our industry, and then we can get into even more about some of the hangups that come up, whether it's fear or assumption or whatever, about what prevents us from performing that advocacy. Anybody want to go first with some?
May I?
Of course.
Okay. So over the last, I want to say 9 months, I've been working closer and closer with Rooster Teeth's casting department, and it's been a delight. I'm known internally at Rooster Teeth as somebody who constantly goes around telling people, if you don't know how to ask the question properly, ask the question improperly, and then I'll tell you how you should have worded it. And then I'll give you your answer, because that gives you a whole new set of tools. Now, that's been my entire history at Rooster Teeth. Now I'm stepping into a new position and doing even more with a lot more hands-on stuff for DEI. I joined the queer BRG for Rooster Teeth as well. So I'm doing a lot of advocacy work behind the scenes. And this is where I get to like get my hands dirty in all of this stuff, where I actually get to like, you know, push things and make changes in different ways. And part of what happened, I want to say I want to say about 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, there was an instance where there were some of the directors and showrunners who were not as informed of something as they should have been. I'm going to speak very vaguely and in very broad strokes because there's a lot of like moving parts here. And when I noticed immediately people leaning in one direction, my own brain flagged something that turned out to be true. There was information about a character that people who were sitting at the table didn't know. So then I stopped all conversations and I'm just like, let's talk about this character. Let's actually break this character down. Let's take a look at the audition sides one more time. Let's take a look at what this character looks like. Let's take a look at who this character is and really boil it down to its basics. And as we started listing things off, some of the directors, their eyes lit up and they realized they had missed something very key and very important. Again, I get to speak in very general tones, so forgive me on this. But when that happened, everybody went all the way back to the beginning in the casting process. Everything was reset to zero and everyone started re-listening to every audition as if it was fresh and came to the table with completely different choices, which was huge. It was a very big deal. And in that process, while everyone was talking about, what this character is and, who this character, would be in the story and all these little details, there was an ability for me to step forward and be like, this is what you can expect. This is what you can, your range. This is what speaks further to the character specifically for what we're trying to cast. And when I linked some source material for people to read and watch, I was just inundated with so many questions, and some people were asking the best questions in the best ways, and some were asking some really great questions in wrong ways. And I was able to give them more information at the end of it. And by the time we finally finished casting, everything ended up perfect, but it did take longer to get that done. And that also added some additional information, which is if you're going to cast appropriately, if you're going to actually do it right, then yes, it might take you an extra couple days. Budget for that. And we learned that, and now our budgets reflect that extra time. And now everybody has more ideas of how to cast particular characters in the future.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Anjali, I know that you were involved in that as well. Do you have anything to add?
Sure. I'm also trying to figure out what I can and can't say. So yeah, it was an interesting experience hearing it from my end because I got bits and pieces, understanding that there might have been some fogginess on casting side as to what they really wanted from this character, and to the point that I was how do I put this? I guess it was foggy to the point where I was very surprised at the specs I saw and what I was hearing was actually being considered for casting. Not surprised in the sense that like I was surprised by, oh gosh, can I say this? Oh, okay. Well, let me put it this way. I think one thing that we all kind of grapple with being trans folks in this industry is the idea of sound. And so that was something that became very key in this conversation. And I think complicated a lot of things behind the scenes. Certainly was kind of frustrating for, I'm sure, actors to, be thinking about and hearing. And I think that kind of reflected in, or that was kind of caused by just misinformation and just, what tends to happen when cis folks don't ask questions about what they can be doing to get it right, and that's not necessarily a moment of like malice, but it's ignorance, and it's not taking a moment to step back and think about what are we trying to portray with this character. So from my end, it was kind of bizarre, and a moment where I tried to extend some help as well and resources that I had. At the time, we were still developing the directory, and so that certainly, I think, came into play a little bit. But there was a happy ending, so I'm just glad we got there, and I'm hoping that this story is vague but helpful in some way. If I said anything at all in the past 2 minutes, I might have said absolutely nothing.
I mean, what I was getting from it is like, if you put in the work and if you help them, show them why they need to put in the work, it will help talent and it'll help you. Sometimes even, as talent, you can offer help and that'll directly lead to you getting a role. Like that can happen.
Right. And this was the kind of moment where it was not about, I mean, I personally was not a good fit for this character, but it wasn't about that. I found it to be so important to connect talent with Rooster Teeth. I found it really important to make sure that they had the resources to get it right, because regardless of intention, if they don't have the resources, that's something else entirely. And so I'm glad it turned out well in the end. But I also want to stop before I say anything I shouldn't. So
honestly, that's bouncing off of that's another thing that I see come up is there's just a lot of assumptions, I think, that are made by, like, especially by folks who aren't queer. There's sort of just this, oh, well, I've heard it's this way, so I'll assume it is and I won't ask. And so I've had something similar happen a while back now. There was a talent pool that I had put my name in for, and I had like said in the application that, okay, I'm trans. And then I started receiving emails from them, and I noticed they were all trans characters. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure I know someone else who's on this list, so I'll ask them if they've only been receiving trans characters. They hadn't. So I was like, okay, I think I can see what's happening here. So I decided, I was like, okay, I'll email them and I'll ask about it. Just, hey, are you only sending me trans characters? Because I'm comfortable auditioning for and voicing non-trans characters, like cis characters. I'm totally fine with that. And yeah, they were like, oh, we didn't know you were okay with that. Yes. So yeah, so sometimes it really isn't a sense of maliciousness. It's literally just an assumption and ignorance, and just informing someone otherwise can make them completely realize, oh, I didn't even think that I had a bias on this, but I suppose I did.
Yeah. Check in with your, like, with directors who are casting, people whose lists you're on, your agents. There will never be anything wrong with, every couple months ago, check in and just, because I've even had it where I had somebody, I was receiving only girls, and I had spoken to them, when my first conversation with them was, I want girls and guys. I want to play and non-binary folk and just like monsters. Just give it to me if you think I'm a fit. I was only receiving these girls, and only very specific girls that were like Aubrey Plaza-esque characters. And I was like, okay, something is up. So I emailed and I said, hey, checking in. I do want to receive masculine sides. And I think that I would be a really good fit for some of these that I'm seeing. Please open that up, and here's an example of what I can do to refresh you. And that is super helpful. An example of what you can do, even if it's just, record like 30 seconds. But the response I got was, oh, gladly, I will absolutely send you those sides. I was worried about offending you. And that is a major issue of just like, they won't always reach out to you. So I highly recommend checking in with them. And so that you don't lose out on opportunities and you don't miss out on something that could be a really good fit for you. And obviously don't like worry about it every day, thinking, oh, is this happening? Certain feelings like that may creep into your mind, but just checking up with them occasionally, I would highly, highly recommend. And just, even if you suspect it might be a thing, or you just want to remind them of a specific detail that, like cis folks or like non-queer folks sometimes, skips their brain. And if you do so, from a working relationship perspective and a friendly, approach, more often than not, you will get results, even if it takes a little bit of time. Just sometimes you got to make sure that they don't have like a line or a building plan around you and brick and mortar in the hand. And you got to be like, hold on. Okay, put that down. Let's talk about this.
Speaking to the point of social media that we touched a little bit on earlier, I think it was like beginning 2020 and voice tweets had become a thing, which, thanks Twitter for the one time they did something really good. They gave voice actors voice tweets, and we use them sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And that had been going around in a couple circles of just like, hey, I'm only getting sides that are these kind of characters, or I'm only getting trans characters, of which there really still aren't a lot in media, which means that maybe one every couple months, which means you're not working very much, which, I mean, hurts the business anyway. But I decided to take to Twitter and about like how you approach it. I thought the best way to do that was I wrote out a bit of a script and I used voice tweet, and I just went off and I tried to get it exactly in that 2 minutes that they allow. And I posted, it's like, I went through a significant amount of my range. It's like, and it's all about just asking the question. It's like, what roles are you comfortable portraying? Very simple question. And that's it. That's all, it's like, that's all. It's like, are you comfortable getting audition sides for this? Because the industry historically has never had a problem with casting, cis men as female characters and cis women as male characters. I mean, all the way back to Peter Pan generally being played on stage by female actresses. It's just like, okay, so why is it a problem to ask that same question to trans talent? So I decided to do that, and the response was quite amazing. Everybody was just like, I didn't know that I could do that. It's like, yeah, just ask the question. And if they say, no, I only want these kind of characters, then that's it. Conversation's done. If they say, oh, please send me everything, then send them everything. You'll be surprised.
Yeah. And that's something that I've had a really good experience with at CESD, particularly with Sam, who, like, how do you approach like, because you've talked with us, just literally, you've said, come to me if you need to talk about something, or if you think that there's something that needs to be talked about. I'm so grateful for that. But like, I know that you wanted to maybe talk about like what things that you look for in talent as well, to help some talent out, and maybe just like, make sure that they know, help us make sure that they know what they're able to do, and yeah, how do you approach that?
Often it's from a place of assuming I know nothing, and in meetings I have, especially with queer talent, I always say, like, please, like, all we ask is for patience and for you to be honest with us when something is off. Anjali, a couple months in, was like, hey, I want to read more male roles. And did it in like a totally reasonable human to human way. And it might have been scary, Anjali. I don't actually know if that was tough for you or not, but at the end of the day, on my side of things as an agent at an agency, the hilarious part about all of this is that it's profitable for us to have diverse talent. From a pure business side of things, it's good for us to not have just white, cis, male, and females at this point. The industry is changing in that direction, and it's either you're ahead of the train or you've missed the train. And so in that regard, what I look for, honestly, is good people. And I know that might not be the answer that everyone wants here, but I honestly, before I'm looking at whether you are queer, how you identify, where you're from, I like try to have a phone call when I can to try and suss out, is this someone who is willing to grow with me and grow the agency in a direction? Because, in a positive direction, because it's important for all of us to be working together in this, on my side as well as your side. And so for me, that's what I look for. I look for if you're a good person, then if you're talented. I mean, I can only speak to the people that I rep right now, but Kaylee and Anjali both had demos that blew me away. And it didn't matter at the end of the day. Yes, I was looking for diverse talent, but I was looking for good talent. And it's about, if you're talented, then you can bring money to this agency, you know? And I know that's maybe a little more of a manufactured answer. But on my end, it's just about looking for good people, looking for talented people, and asking more questions than assuming anything.
And honestly, that's what I want people to feel comfortable doing, is being able to say, I don't know a lot. Please enlighten me as we go forward with this. Ask questions and help me ask questions. Like, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
Toward that point, Sam, I would love to hear a little bit to kind of go back to the story that Kaden and Anjali were talking about. Have you, either from reading a reading copy that comes in yourself, or because one of your clients has had questions, how have you been able to advocate with a casting director about, hey, there's a lack of clarity about a character, or this character is worded, their character description is worded in a way that is either offensive or unclear, or, you know, something like, how do you approach that discussion with casting?
sure. I think part of my job is to be like a protection for my talent in a certain extent. So if I see someone get cast as a certain character that I'm like, this is going to be problematic, I go to the casting director before I even tell the talent that they've booked it and be like, I just want to like really confirm this is what you're going for. This is what you mean by this. And there have been times where they were like, oh, we didn't realize this. I mean, this is like, probably I should have told you this beforehand, Anjali, but there was a time where you were cast as a Native American character because I pitched you and I said, Anjali's Indian. And
Oh,
Oof.
Yikes.
when I was doing a pitch list around to my buyers, and they were like, great. And I was like, and I looked up the character before I sent it to you. And I was like, this character is Native American. Are you sure you're looking for Anjali, who is Indian from India? And they were like, oh, no.
Woof.
But at the end of the day, that casting director was probably really happy that I saved them what would have been a bad situation. I mean, again, Anjali probably would have flagged it themselves, but you know, so there's just stuff like that where I try to be slower and ask more questions. And when I get sides that are specifically for queer folk, I read it twice to 3 times. It's really that simple. And ask questions. It's just, I think there's a fear of coming across as ignorant. And maybe it's just because it's been drilled into me that, like, I read like Socrates growing up, and I was just like, ask questions. And so that's how I do it, honestly. It's I ask questions as casting directors. I ask for clarification before I put my talent in awkward situations where they have to say to casting directors or say to directors, this is not actually me.
I feel the need to say that Sam is the exception and not the rule, and that most of the time I think we have to be proactive and be the ones who prompt people asking questions in the first place and make it clear that we are open to questions, because I don't think everyone has the attitude of it is okay to ask. So
Yeah.
I feel like we should note that.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that our work of doing that, you know, when we do it, is helping and will help make more people who are open and eager, help them become that and fill the industry with that. That is definitely something that I want to try and help create.
Well, if we have a second. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Okay, I was just gonna say, speaking on your point earlier, Sam, I was very scared to come to you about that, specifically about wanting to read for more male characters. And I think this is like just an interesting point, where I'm sure there are people who might be watching or watching the recording later that might be interested in, where it's, and not to focus on this because that's not the focus of this panel, but in terms of like self-advocacy and thinking about what roles you're good for, like I haven't transitioned yet. I have a voice that sounds, you know, like a cis woman, a traditionally feminine voice. And so, you know, whether or not I am what people think of for guys above the age of like 13, that was something that I wanted to be reading for, because a lot of times those are the characters that I connect with more. And so that was something where it was hard for me to ask, but it was important to me to ask. And so that's sort of a moment where I think I don't know if I have a happy ending to that. There's no like real moral of the story there, because at the end of the day, like there are certain expectations for sound, and that's something that we battle with every single day. But I think that that shouldn't, I guess, curb our motivation to try to, you know, try to change people's perception of that to the extent that we can, or at least, you know, try to get our voices out there, try to get people listening. So that's just a quick little thing
Oh
there.
yeah, I think that makes plenty of sense. That was, you know, probably nerve-wracking for you, and I think it's important to note that on my side, it was like a no-brainer. You know, to be like, yes, of course, send you things. It's maybe I'm like giving away a very crucial agency secret, but it is really easy to send copy to people. It is like much easier than maybe we let on, but I just BCC people, and that's like how I do it. And it's emailing, and it's very simple for us. So I would say, don't be scared to compassionately, kindly ask for what you want from your agent.
And you know what? With that sound thing, something that I have been learning for myself that I had to convince myself out of, like that fear of like, will they be okay with character with, you know, a voice with this sound? Do I sound girly enough? That's a big one that I've had to struggle with. Yeah. but
That's a huge mood. That's a
yeah.
huge mood.
Or even I've trained myself so much into the feminine, like, can I even do a deep voiced woman? Will it just go, will it like, can I even switch modes like that in that middle range? But honestly, something important is if you are a good actor and you think you have a good read, a novel sound can be very effective. It breaks up what they're hearing, and it's something new and unique. And if you've shown your acting ability, you know, that's what matters, is that you've done a good read. And I know of characters that have been cast with reads that were not a sound they were expecting. You know, and they go to screen and I'm like, this is fresh and this is fun and I love this. I want this. And so it's effective for it's good for them to think about casting that way too. You know, it's something that you shouldn't be afraid of trying. Some folks might judge if they're not as experienced, but they're not going to judge you poorly. They're just going to judge, oh, that's not the sound we're looking for, and move on. So like you could win, And the alternative, the loss is just, somebody else gets it. They aren't going to like call you out or anything. Like, go for it, honestly.
I wanted to like tie this all together, and it's something that I've brought to the table quite a few times. It's that this isn't just kind of something that happens to trans and non-binary talent. There are cis actors who have a naturally deeper range, and they are cis feminine, or it's like cis masculine with a very higher pitched range. And it's just like, well, I'm not getting cast as the characters that I think, I'm getting audition sides for characters that I can't possibly hit because that's not within my range. That's something that you can bring up. I mean, it's like, it's not just an issue that's unique to trans talent. There are plenty of like very well-known actresses and actors with very low range and very high range that are not typical. Going to use those heavy air quotes on that. And it affects everybody. So again, tying into what Kaylee said, if you have a novel sound, if you have the acting talent to back everything up, then nothing else really matters. Shoot for it. And the worst that happens is they pick somebody else. But if you don't try, and this goes for everybody, if you don't try, then you already lost it. So give it a shot. You'll often be surprised.
Yes, honestly, like for the first couple of years when I transitioned, I like didn't audition for any female characters because I was like, well, I have a deeper voice now, and so I probably couldn't do that anymore. But I was like, well, but there are deeper voiced female characters I could go for. So I started again, and sure enough, I got shortlisted for a deeper voiced female character. Like you absolutely can. You never really know what the director wants to hear, and your take might be the one they're like, oh, I actually like that. And they go for it.
Absolutely.
Love that. On the flip side of it, and this goes for Kaden and also Anjali, on the casting side, advocating for a more diverse, more actually of the world, multifaceted, like especially if you're casting like a group of people, not everybody has one sound. Whenever we walk into a mall, we hear, do we still walk into malls? We hear
The past couple of years.
yeah.
No.
Online
Still a
shopping.
90s girl. Yeah, but we hear deep voiced women and high voiced men, and everything that you're saying. How do you advocate as a casting director for producers and developers to think outside the box in terms of what somebody sounds like?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I don't have an example that I think is specific to queer actors or trans actors, but more so casting diversely in general. I think that primarily casting like actors of color has been the biggest thing that I have had to really push for. Most of the people that I have worked with have been wonderful, but there have been occasions where I think that there's just a perception that we can't voice white characters and sound convincing somehow. I think that there is still some old-fashioned thinking about what we can bring with our voice, how we can portray characters that don't look like us, that aren't exactly who we are. I'm trying to think if I can think of a specific situation that'll help, but I mean, recently I had a situation where I was working with a developer who had a group of characters that were visually inspired by by cultures from the global south, and then their fictional cultures were inspired by Western civilizations. And so they were very adamant that they wanted to cast actors who matched them culturally, and so white actors, while the visuals of the characters were all over the place. And so that was an interesting conversation to have. That was one where I really had to parse through that and what it meant to have these characters represent what they were representing, what it was that they were trying to communicate with these characters, and how people, you know, in the world would be playing this particular video game and interpreting that, and the connections that they could have with those characters just based on the visuals alone, which was an interesting conversation, and I think one where I had to sort of wade the waters and really get a feel for whether the story required us casting in a way that might go against what you might typically expect from a story like that. Trying not to say too much there, but understandably that was a hard conversation. But I think generally trying to take advantage of resources to present diverse selects every time when I'm casting has always been a priority, and part of that has been me seeing that there is a lack of resources and wanting to create those resources myself, which was part of why the directory has come to be. And so I think in the end, I hope that that's what most casting directors are doing, and I'll stop my spiel in just a second, but I think that ultimately it's looking at a group of people and looking for the best actor and the best voice for that character, and if the group of people that you're looking at in the first place tends to be cis, white, you know, what you would expect, your final selects are going to end up looking that way too. So it's just our job to bring more diverse options in the first place to get the conversation going and the ball rolling.
Absolutely. Just for anybody out there that doesn't know the directory that Anjali is talking about, QueerVox has a LGBTQIA plus voiceover directory of talent. You can sign up on our website. No, you can't, not yet, in like a week. You can sign up on through our Instagram. Just go to at QueerVox Academy, and there's a link there to submit. And also, if you are in casting or if you're an agent and you want access to this directory, we can provide you access there. And this whole thing was built by Anjali. So thank you, Anjali, for doing that.
And we already have a lot of
Amazing.
wonderful folks who are using this directory, and I'm very excited to see how it goes.
For sure. For sure.
Fantastic. Yeah, talking about like that kind of weird disconnect of like talent and roles, sort of like the difference between punching up and punching down. It's sort of like there's this duality of like forcing up and forcing down. It's like you should make sure your characters of color and of certain cultures, you know, if that's a part of their story that they are telling, that the right people are telling that story. At the same time, you know, a white American or something like that, you know, character, straight guy, force up and, you know, allow, like, it's not productive to be like, this has to be a white, straight American man doing this character. And I've heard stories of that, of people thinking that way. I've heard stories of a casting director say, I don't cast gay people as my straight characters because I don't think they can portray straight characters effectively and realistically. And same for trans. And that's insane. So that's one of those situations where definitely that person needs a conversation, or other people need to be warned about that person. That's another way you can help your fellow talent. And maybe even sometimes, you know, help, like I said, talking to the studio and being like, hey, so I want to have a conversation with, you know, this director. If it's something particularly like that, like getting you and offering them community resources like the list, and having the community behind you, you know, and getting quotes from other people in your situation with the expertise on the subject. Super helpful. But yeah, it can definitely be problems that we're working through. So it's a learning process, and we definitely you know, doing our best to help push that in to be a thing of the past.
So I want to talk about it in a slightly different way too. Now that we are recording from home a lot of the time, the industry opened up a lot more in a lot of different ways. That means that people from the UK and Australia and all over the world are, being able to audition for what was traditionally just a, United States, project. So what ended up happening in one particular instance is we got a ton of auditions in, and an Australian actress used an American accent for take one, and then for take two used her natural, Australian accent. And that accent, the Australian accent, got shortlisted because it was something that no one had really thought of before, but it added a unique dynamic that no one really had considered, and it brought another discussion to the table. And I was like, well, what if we did that? What does this character sound like if we did that? And it was a heavy consideration. They ended up casting someone else, but it wasn't because they had the American accent. It was something entirely different. It was actually a different accent entirely. It wasn't even an American accent that was cast for that. And it was the case of like, people should be encouraged, especially now that the world has opened up and we're casting across the globe. I mean, again, shoot your shot with it. It's like, yeah, if it doesn't say there's any particular accent on it, yes, most likely they're looking for a quote unquote, American Hollywood style accent. But if they're letting you do a second take, go for it, because those voices should, one, be cast more often, and two, they add texture and variety to a world that the directors and the showrunners might not have thought about. And that's something that I've been heavily pushing forward. And anytime I bring somebody to my short list, it's basically like, well, why did you put this one on the short list? Like, here is my checklist as to why this particular person is on the short list, because you will be brought to task. If you bring, it's like, here's my 5 people that I think can do this. And the directors listen to it. It's like, oh, that's what I was thinking too. But every once in a while, they'll be like, well, why did you put this one in there? And when you start to explain why, you start to see those cogs start to turn. It's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That actually, like, that difference makes a difference. So those second takes are so important. If you can sell everything, it's like you want to sell it all with your acting talent, and the acting talent will take them through that first take. But that second take, I cannot encourage people enough to just shoot for the moon and do what, you feel comes natural. Even if it's not necessarily perfect for the audition sides, again, you'll be surprised how often that take will be brought to the table. And even if it's not cast, will start a conversation in and of itself.
And
Talking
really
about,
quick,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say really quick also, I think that one of the best ways, because we are so intimately familiar with the frustration around sound and how it feels on the actor's end to often have to sit there and analyze, is this the sound that they're like, is there a point to me reading this? A lot of times we can be playing these mind games with ourselves. And so at least when I'm on the other side, on the occasions that I am on the other side, I think that that really informs how I, come up with casting sides, and how I almost totally avoid describing the actor as opposed to the character. That's one of the things that I think is very helpful in that regard, unless we're looking for a specific actor. I think it generally just and this is all to say, and I say this a lot, so people have probably heard me say this before, but diversity behind the scenes in casting and in production and et cetera, will 100% push the needle forward further than we can do alone. So that's my little spiel there that I have to drop every time I talk about this.
100%, 100%.
Yes.
Every time you say it, it's like, that's it. That's the whole point.
How has that international market affected you in Canada, Cal?
A lot, actually, because interestingly, that push to remote didn't happen in Canada when COVID hit. Weirdly, yeah. I don't know 100% why, but where things really went like full remote in the US, which was great for everyone, including myself, in Canada, everyone just kind of was like, no, we're just gonna keep going in the studio. I don't know why. I mean, I know they took precautions and everything, but yeah, so it didn't really open things up as much, but I do think it had a trickle effect because with the US market opening up so much and opening up so much more diverse voices, I think a lot of studios in Canada did see, oh, there's a lot more actors out there than I knew about. So I have seen like agencies like Carrier Talent have been like they have a really diverse roster that they've of actors they've got, and other agencies too I know have, since the US went remote, even though it didn't happen in Canada, I think there has been a sort of observation of the diversity that's been happening. And the US going so remote, of course, did help a lot of actors, myself included, in Canada, because I was able to do work for with companies that beforehand probably never would have considered me. So it's a whole new world, I'd say.
That's awesome.
Well, we have a couple, excuse me, we have a few questions from folks, and I just wanted to throw to those while we have time. So our first question from Maximilian Reed was, how do each of you navigate your personal journeys in an honest and authentic way while being sensitive to the journeys others are on? As a non-binary person, I see a lot of thought-provoking discourse on so many sides of the conversation, and sometimes that conversation seems to get so heated that I hesitate to contribute fear of misstepping. So I'm going to boil this down just a little bit because I think this is spreads. It goes to a larger question. We were talking about at the beginning of this that there's very little pushback from like when we speak up to our superiors or when we speak up to agents or casting directors. There's that general sense of learning, but I do feel that amongst ourselves sometimes, and I mean like the general voiceover community, including our cis and straight siblings, there is that pushback and there is sometimes that heated argument. How do we navigate that while remaining our authentic selves?
I've talked a lot, so I would like to bequeath the floor to anyone who wants to speak first.
It's a tough one.
It really is.
I
Because
guess
like it does get
Honestly,
really heated, yeah.
honestly, I'll speak on it. I think viewing those situations as, desiring forward momentum for the community first and foremost, and not getting caught up in your view versus my view, is very important and very productive. I have had disagreements with other people in the community, but I sit down. What I do is I say, I don't agree with that, and then I say, why don't I agree with that? And I sit down and I think about it, and I think about my reasonings. I talk about it with a friend. I explore the depths of it. I figure out the core of my view on it, and I then figure out how to say it in a productive way that will build understanding. That's super important to me, is like, I can say, I don't agree with you. This is what's right, all I want. But building understanding from their side is the really important part that will further our community and help us all. And so that's the approach that I take.
I
Yeah.
don't think this. Oh,
No,
ahead.
you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think this actually answers the question, but I think the root of that question is that fear that, again, this is not industry specific, this is just in general, that fear that we are playing spokesperson to our entire community as soon as we say something that, from our experience and our position, we are we feel about whatever issue. And so I think that it's frustrating. I think if you're trying to start a conversation, there are so many ways to go about it. If this is like on social media versus like, are you, talking to a group of peers in private, like it's hard to gauge. So I completely understand kind of being like worried about how to avoid misstepping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, what Kaylee said, and I think like being open to being wrong and being open to like disagreeing and it not being, I think there's this weird perception that we need to hold a united front in front of everyone else, because if they see us disagreeing, suddenly that means they're allowed to question us in when we, advocate for ourselves. I think that's the fear. I think that maybe it has some foundation, but I think for the most part, being confident in the fact that we can speak to our experiences regardless of if they are the same as someone else in the community, and be able to advocate for ourselves with the full confidence that we're speaking from a place of personal experience. I think that will probably get you farther than worrying too much, even though I know it's hard not to worry about whether that is something that the rest of the community totally shares.
Mhm.
I mean,
And
regardless, like if you are speaking, I always make an effort not to speak for everyone and say that I'm not speaking for everyone. But if you say that and then you are speaking for yourself, you are speaking for the community because you're a part of the community. Guaranteed, there's other people who have the same lines as you, similar lines, similar comfortabilities, and that there are general things that, that can be said. Kaden, wait, you were saying something?
I think there's also like, especially when it comes to social media, there's also a level of, being able to like check yourself in the moment. It's because I mean, speaking personally, there's plenty of times where I see something and I start getting frustrated and it's like, this is definitely not the time for me to speak on this because I am currently a little heated. Or you can tell from certain phrases and certain ways if the other person is coming at it from that angle. It's like sometimes it's not just about finding your right wording, because you could have the perfect wording, but if you have like the wrong attitude or the other person happens to have the wrong attitude at that time, timing is also important. There's been plenty of times where something big happens and everybody wants to like get in on something at that moment because everybody's reading about it or everybody's talking about it. And I take a moment and really like write out all my thoughts and try and compartmentalize everything. And then like a month or two later, I'm just like, hey, everybody was talking about this a while ago. I wanted to bring this back and then change the temperature of the room. Because if everybody was angry about it 2 months ago and you come back, the room has cooled down and you start the conversation and you are level-headed, people will join you in that as well. And while I'm talking about it, when it comes to a lot of things, sometimes it's good to just sit back and listen. I did a panel with a bunch of game devs a while ago, and one of my biggest things is sometimes it's okay to just shut up and sit there and take in information. Like I cannot talk about, it's like anything from the experience of anyone from the PGM. I can't. So that is my time to sit there, listen, and learn a lot, because there's so much to learn that's already out there and being spoken. And if you're just, quiet and you listen, then you're already learning a bunch of things. And that goes every which way. So sometimes it's okay to just be quiet and take in some information about when it's time for you to speak, when it's better for you to speak, or even how to approach that conversation next time.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Awesome. Our next one, the conversation, this is from an anonymous. The conversation Kaden and Anjali alluded to sounds intriguing, but hard to follow with missing info. NDAs, right? What might
Sorry.
what might a mock table conversation sound like, warts and all? Okay, so rather than have you reenact like a boardroom telenovela, can we just go around really quickly and not the meanest, not the weirdest, not that it like the most problematic, but what are the common tropes that you hear, the common missteps that you hear that, we can clear up right here and now?
Oh. The trans sound.
Ah,
I mean, we have to
Yeah.
talk about it. We have to talk about it. What does a trans voice sound like? Sounds like everybody else's. Sounds like anything and everything, because
Or a
there is
non-binary
no,
voice.
it just
Yeah.
doesn't sound, there is no sound. It doesn't exist. It's myth. It's a
It's
legend.
fake.
It
You
doesn't
want
exist.
androgynous? Just say androgynous.
Yeah.
What?
Literally,
Fine.
you're allowed to
We
say
won't get
that.
offended.
You can. It's fine.
Don't
It's an
waste
okay
our time
word.
if you're looking for that. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's I hate that when it's like, oh, I want a non-binary voice. That means nothing. They can sound like anything. If you want androgynous, just say that. That's okay to say.
Androgynous is a descriptor. You can say that, and people will be like, "Oh, okay, I have an
Cis
idea of
people
what
can
that's."
have androgynous voices.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like,
We brought it up earlier. It's just like this whole thing doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's constantly pointed out that, like, oh, what's a non-binary voice sound like? What's a trans voice sound like? It's like, you're not describing anything, because a man that is cis and a woman that is cis, there is no sound for that either. Like, you can
No.
describe a voice
You
as
know-
husky or breathy, or, you know, it's like maybe gravelly or gritty or aged or young or androgynous. There's so many descriptors. Use those, and then we'll figure out the rest. That's what our job as actors is, to figure that part
Yeah.
out.
Like there's a reason we have a whole industry for this, and there isn't just one person who does all the voices for everything ever.
It, especially with like with that non-binary sound, and what is the non-binary sound question, that has so many pitfalls, because they literally 100% of the time, when it's cis people like that don't have a lot of knowledge asking themselves that, they either fall on androgynous or just sounds like a cis woman. And
Yeah.
that is a big problem. That is a major problem. That's I would say my big one that I would say. The other big one that I had very recently is somebody casting a trans person of color, and then them saying things like trans is the more important part, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Like, those talent exist. You don't need to do that, especially like, and then they get really vague about it and stuff, and it's just like, if you're casting representatively, just make sure it's represented. Just take a bit more time. Like Kaden was saying earlier, take a bit more time, use the resources.
we
Like,
talked about, oh, sorry.
yeah, no,
was
yeah,
just gonna say,
I
we
had a
talked about
conversation.
this a little bit. I think oftentimes what I see is kind of giving up before you try is a very common thing, where
Ugh.
they just
Yeah.
decide that it's impossible to find a specific talent, so they don't bother, or they prioritize which parts of their identity matter more. And that's a fascinating approach, because a lot of times I will see something where it's cast a certain way, and I will know someone who fits that exact description, is a great actor. I'll ask them, did you get a chance to read for this? And the answer is no. So that's, yeah, I would say most of the time it's time and effort that I think some folks are 100% putting in, but then at other times I just don't see, unless there is like public pressure to do so.
I can also speak slightly to this, that I sometimes have to put out copy and be like, please know these are not my words. These are the words that were given to me. I disagree with how they are phrased, you know, and I just have to say things like that because it clearly comes from people who are afraid to ask questions. So I will say, to reiterate what everyone here is saying, don't be afraid to ask questions, because most of the time, if you just assume or you try to figure it out on your own, you're going to end up coming off more offensive, even if your intention is to be politically correct.
Awesome. Sam, I'm actually going to throw this next question to you. Similar to, this is from Natalie. Similar to Kaylee, I'm okay with pretty much any roles, men, women, monsters, etc. Men are monsters. That said, when making a demo, should I include those voices, or should I make a separate demo for each type of people or entities?
I was told by Steve Bloom himself, like, when I showed him my original demo before being repped or anything, it was all men. And then I was like, oh, I can show them, feminine stuff like on the side. And Steve Bloom said, Kaylee, this is something unique that very few people have. Put this on your demo. You blew me away with what you can do. I want to see it there. And then I did that. And then a couple months later, I was repped by CESD. So yes, do it.
Yes. To reiterate, Kaylee, absolutely. I can give my demo that I look for briefly. 60 seconds, 10 seconds a character, start with your normal speaking voice, and from there switch to the most drastic change of character that you can do. And that's how you hook someone. And put in, it can be tricky, do you put in like the classic soldier sound, all this stuff. At the end of the day, tropes can be helpful, but what I want to see is range. And so with that is monster sounds, that is young boys, young girls, androgynous sounds. As much range as you can put into 60 seconds, please do.
That is exactly, that's how I built my demo. It's just like, I recorded everything separately. It's like, how do we piece this together? It's like, go with something that's closer to my natural tone and then immediately switch to the deepest, most gravel, darkish voice I got. And then immediately to this like 8-year-old girl. It's like, just blow them away. Like, if you've got it, use it, flaunt it.
And Sam, just to drill down just a little more specifically, not for seeking representation, but for in-house use, like that demos that you would use for pitching, or for talent who are pitching themselves for work, do you advise having multiple versions? Like, for instance, let's say a young trans woman who is really good at also playing like the young male hero. Should they cut together a demo that's just that, does that all make sense? Or
Yeah. I think there's the perfect world and there's the real world. And the real world is, the perfect world would be that your agent would be able to identify immediately what demo, would be best to pitch you for everything. And I think that is just a little bit unrealistic on our end.
Mhm.
We recommend an animation demo, a commercial demo, and a video game demo. And if you do it, a promo trailer narration demo. Within those, I think, again, I recommend 60 seconds and, try to show your range, show like what you're good at and switch back and forth, as Kaden said. If you have, so there are some people who have a robot voice demo, and there's some people who, because that like is a very big spectrum, and there's people who have monster voice demos, and that's a very big spectrum. I would say those can be helpful to have, but really if that is something that you are constantly competitive in. Until then, I would say focus on the bookable demo, what you are good at, what you can crush, because ultimately I, don't know the casting side, but we go for what is going to be efficient for the casting directors to view, because we understand that they are viewing hundreds of reads, hundreds of demos whenever they ask for that stuff. Sure. And so we want you to be able to put your best foot forward immediately and universally. Cool.
Awesome. Next one. This is from Danny. If you're sending in an audition that doesn't require you to be trans or queer for the role, do you mention your identity? I typically try to, because it's something I want people to know and it's important to me, but I'm afraid some casting directors might view me differently or not consider me for the role because of it. Thoughts there?
It's a fear I've had, but I'll sometimes, I will usually withhold it unless, if I'm pitching to their list, I'm definitely mentioning it. If I'm auditioning for a specific role, I will mention it on occasion if it is a particularly progressive studio that I know is looking for diverse talent. That can help you. I don't do it probably 90% of the time, but I think when I save it for those, it does help.
I know, like, for a lot of indie projects, a lot of devs are queer. So if you know that a dev is queer, I mean, they really, like, a lot of people in the industry are. So like if you know they are, then that can be helpful, because then you can be like, hey, you know, I am also queer. Queer talent wants to work with queer talent often. But yeah, for bigger places you don't know, or for like, yeah, like big studios, or if you know a studio isn't super progressive, then yeah, I'd say I typically don't for those ones.
Yeah, same. It's completely case by case. Usually research goes into it. Usually, like, getting a feeling for, do I think this is potentially going to hurt me in the long run? And sometimes I've gotten it wrong, and I will, after the fact, find out maybe I should not have mentioned that. And maybe it was best to keep it to myself. Uh, but usually it's never, at least for me, I try to be subtle, and I will just put my pronouns and my little at the end of my email, um, unless it is like very relevant that I mention it up front. But yeah, otherwise I try. I don't think I think I try to generally. I think Kaylee said like 90% of the time. That's probably the same for me.
I've actually had a situation where I did submit an audition where I was like, I'm not sure about them because I'm not familiar with the studio. And Sam actually emailed me and said, hey, this reads like you're trying to hide your trans status. I think that it would benefit you for this studio to not do that. I think your diversity can help you a lot. And that encouragement was super, super helpful, honestly. Like I was like, okay, yeah, awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I said about the demo. That is your 5 seconds to just show an incredible range, because you slate in your speaking voice and then you're auditioning in the character tone you chose. And I just think it can be really beneficial at times.
That actually kind of goes back. Oh, sorry.
I basically do exactly what you do, Julie, which is I have like in my signature, in my email, I have my pronouns, and I let that speak for me until I feel comfortable in the situation enough to bring it up. Basically, if the conversation
Huge.
begins to be like, hey, we'd like to cast you for this, it's like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to start talking to you more openly about who I am now that we're having the business discussion as well. So we get to learn a little bit more about each other that way. But aside from that, it's my pronouns in the signature really kind of goes a long way in a lot of cases sometimes.
And really quick, I guess, sort of talking about what Sam was saying with letting the demo really communicate your range. I guess the reason why I tend to hold back a little bit is because I think we hope that people look at the business side first. If you have someone coming in like Kaylee, whose range is insane, you would hope people would see dollar signs and immediately, be on top of that. But I think, like, there are definitely studios that are still old fashioned, and so it's just about being careful. But I think we're getting better. So more often than not, studios are excited to hear that you're diverse, which can be an interesting feeling. Yeah, thank you. I work really hard at it. So it's I think, like, at least this is a good sign. It's positive. It makes me feel hopeful for the future, so that's great.
Actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say really quickly. Something I also do as well. Since I work also in a very small market here locally, because I'm in Winnipeg, which is not a voiceover hub, but there is voice work here. Um, Obviously not super progressive, in general. But so something that I'll often do with folks I work with here is coming in. I won't tell them. I won't tell them that I'm trans. But once they've worked with me, once they know they really like my sound, which happens often because it's a small market, I will then tell them, hey, I'm trans. And I've had a couple times where that's sort of made people go, oh, and they sort of have that light bulb moment of, okay, I didn't even know there was trans talent here. And like it's opened them up a bit more to having trans actors. So even if initially you feel like you don't put it forward, you can later, and that can help a lot.
Awesome. Uh, Piggybacking on what Anjali was just talking about, this one is specifically to Anjali and Calvin. How does being specifically people of the global majority and trans affect your experience when trying to have these conversations about inclusion and advocacy? It often feels as though, especially when we as PGM advocate for casting authentically for a character's race and gender identity, that PGM tend to face more animosity or are at more threat of being labeled a troublemaker. Would you be able to talk about your experiences with that, if any?
Sorry, I'm
It's
developing
all
my
right.
thoughts. Okay, Al, if you want to go first, I'm like thinking.
I am too a bit. I know for me, I do always try to be a little bit more cautious with myself because I'm white passing. I know that, and that's something that I always want to be aware of as well. Because for me, it's easier, honestly, for me to talk about those things and not get labeled as a troublemaker because I'm white passing, so people will take me more seriously, which is very stupid. But to that effect, like I'm always I want to talk about those things where I can, and advocate for them more. But I honestly like to defer more where I can to people who I know have a lot more direct experience with those things. Like there are often times where I don't have a direct experience even when I'm being asked about it. So for me, I often will be like, hey, if I don't have all the answers for this, I'll point them to someone else who does. And that can help a lot. Having, other people that I can be like, here's some other people you can ask as well. It's not just me.
I think I think that like speaking about whether there might be more animosity, I'm not sure if that's the case, but I think that a part of that might just be it's easier to some extent, and for some folks it's easier to fly under the radar being queer than it is being a person of color, and so that's a big part of it. um Even just like for me having like an ethnic name versus having like an American white name, uh like I get flagged in just emails. Like it can I think that that's probably the discrepancy, I guess, that you're seeing. If you're seeing more of like a negative response to when PGM folks speak up about issues that they're facing in the industry versus queer folks, is usually like you know you kind of have it stuck in your head that if a person, like, you can associate an image with a person, you're more likely to remember them in the future, to remember what it is they might have said, what they might have brought up. While I think, hmm, I think it's hard because I don't know if there's like a super like distinct experience when people are speaking up that I've seen, where I feel like it is wholly negative. Because I think their difference is also where the community is, and I think with like there's just such a large community of PGM folks, even though obviously we're not all one and the same, and so there are different issues and different experiences going on there. I think there are just more people to be talking about these issues, and so that's also different compared to, I think, queer folk and especially trans folk. There is a very small pocket of us comparatively, and so it can feel a little it can sometimes feel a little less protected because we have less people in our corner to sort of bounce off of, and that's an aspect of it. I don't know if I'm totally answering this question because it's a complicated question, and generally, I think the answer tends to be that these are like marginalized experiences complicate each other, and so I can tell you that it can be hard if I'm in a room of just white queer folk talking about the experiences of being marginalized versus being in a room of just other people of color and being the only queer person there. That's also a very different experience. And that's a general life thing as opposed to in the industry. I don't know if I know enough other queer people of color, and specifically trans people of color, to really communicate a larger experience that we're having. There just aren't a lot of us. And I hope that changes, I guess, is where I'm going to
Yeah.
end that. I hope there are more of us and we can talk about these issues, because that's certainly a unique experience that I think we need to start the discussion on soon when we can.
Awesome. I just have two more questions. We're just going to go a hair over, but just a little bit. Tomcat asks, hello, darlings. My question is it easier to have these conversations if you are an established VO? In other words, if you have years of work under your belt, are the conversations more approachable to have these conversations? As someone who is a baby VO, I do wonder about the seniority/hierarchy of voiceover.
Well, I
What
will
I've
say,
seen. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I still consider myself a baby voice actor. I'm not, so I feel definitely a fear that I think is very present in newer folks, where we don't have our heels dug in just yet, and we don't have the stability and the existing connections that people who've been around for a long time have. But the reality is there aren't a lot of us that were around a long time ago. A lot of us are new because a lot of us didn't have a place in the industry even 5-10 years ago to be able to start advocating at that point. So I think that that's just par for the course.
Yeah, I'm pretty dang new, and I was doing it straight from the get-go. Like, not a second after I was signed at CESD, I was like, okay, I was good enough for them to believe in me, for Sam to believe in me. I have the skills. I am doing this for myself and because I love telling stories, but also because I saw that, like, I knew that change needed to happen. So I was doing it straight from square one. And I do think, honestly, it can go both ways for established actors, because I've heard from them, like, sometimes old hat actors have already, like, when I mentioned that, like, brick and mortar, like building a wall around you, some of those older pedigree and actors, they already have the bricks and the walls put around them, and it can be harder for them to get out of that and talk about it. Whereas some people, they have kept it relatively open the whole time, and they have a lot of resources that they can talk about and feel safe. But also, having the bigger you are, the larger of an audience you have, the more people are scrutinizing you. So I think there's pros and cons to both sides.
For sure. I just want to add to that as somebody who's been around a little longer, I tend to think that we're at a place that even the newest person speaking up has a voice and is important and deserves to be heard. However, when we're able to get those people on our side who are not only veterans but ally veterans, and they speak up on our behalf as well, I mean, those are the things that move mountains. Like, when you get somebody, I'm not going to go into names or whatever, but when you get somebody who's doing like a classic character for 20 years to back you up, yeah, that's always huge. All right, last question. This is from Maddie Park, who I assume is a new queer voice actor. Hey guys, any advice for new queer voice actors? So as the last question, I would love to hear specifically from the lens of a queer voice performer, like, what should a queer voice performer be considering as they enter this career? One thing from each person.
The gears.
Gotta come up with that smart wisdoms.
I'm going to throw mine
Smart
out.
wisdom.
I'm going to throw mine out real quick because this is the one I tell everybody. Start considering what your sandbox is, what the boundaries of the sandbox that you feel comfortable playing in. And that's, I'm speaking primarily in terms of gender, but I'm also speaking in terms of just different characters, the voices that you can do, and also what lies beyond those boundaries that you are not comfortable playing with, so that you can go into any relationship be it an agent, a casting director, what have you, and being able to have that knowledgeable conversation about, I have an awareness of my instrument, and I also have an awareness of my soul and what I feel good about and what I don't. That's me.
You know what I'm gonna say for mine? Join QueerVox. Get into the voiceover community on Twitter.
Yes.
Honestly, that has helped me so much. I was not even really in the community when I initially got signed. But after and because I really didn't know where it was somehow, it felt hard to like find it and get into it. But once you do, you really just need to add a couple of people in this, follow some folks here on Twitter, join the QueerVox server, look at these names, the conversations, join in a little bit, occasionally, and building that camaraderie, finding other people at your level as well, especially that you can like build a group with, invaluable, honestly, to your career, like growth, not only your mental health and like your enjoyment of your career, but to your growth.
Same wavelength, because I was literally about to say that this is life advice, but find your people, because like
Yeah,
you'll go crazy without them. I'm telling you now. Like I feel like just even people in this like call, I feel like you guys are like holding my mental health up like with your bare hands sometimes, where I think we tend to question ourselves more than most folks, and no one understands us better than each other. And a lot of times, beyond just being there, like developing friendships, which is amazing, and like really being part of a community, you're sharing resources and experiences and learning about the industry, and like it is like a fountain of information as well. And so like it is always in your best interest to just talk to people, because I've also found, I mean, people always say VO is the nicest corner of the industry, we're the nicest part of entertainment, but it's also because we just are so ready to advocate for each other as much as we advocate for ourselves. And it's heartwarming. It's great, it's very sappy, but we see it in real time. Like my best advocates are the friends that I've made, in like the time that I've been doing VO, and I go out of my way to advocate for people that I know are so talented and like, deserve the world. And so that's part of it. I think those relationships are one of the like biggest things that you should be focusing on, like, like nurturing, but also just will bring you so much like long-term satisfaction in this career.
Anjali hit something that I wanted to talk about.
I know, me too.
It's like, all right, let's go.
This is the
You
friendship
see-
circle.
You see the people who are here. We've already started paving some paths and starting conversations and putting together resources. And we're pretty vocal about what we have to offer and where to find all that. It's all there. Find these people, find the resources and tools they've already, put on the shelf for you, and use them for yourself, because it will take you further, faster. You will learn so much from what we talk about because I learned so much from the people who came before me, and so on and so forth. And then you find your group, and then you learn from them. But the tools are there. They're all there. We talk about them constantly. We're trying to demystify so much. It's like, hey, here's the secrets. They're not really that amazing, and there's not like really too many of them, but here's the 3 things you really need to know. And we talk about this stuff fairly frequently. So if you're following the right people, and the right people are very open and mindful to all those situations, you'll see people retweeting resources or talking about different things and giving you those tools for free. They're just giving them to you because we want more. We actually really do want to see more people starting this. While the industry is such an expansive and growing thing, it should and could be way, way bigger, because there are definitely folks out there that are still having trouble finding those, specific representation points. And the only way that we can make it so that it's not that hard to find it is more of you. So start, join, find those resources. We bring them all the time. You'll see everybody here tweeting about them constantly. And then find your group and then grow your own resources and then share those, pay it forward.
And don't be afraid to like push past that fear of like, I don't know this and I don't know where to find it, so I'm not going to try.
Yes.
Push past that fear. I think that's a fear in all of us, but just Googling or searching a couple keywords on Twitter, you'll probably find, a rabbit hole to go down that'll really give you a foothold.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cal.
No, totally. I mean, I'm going to just basically repeat what everyone else said, but like, seriously, I know something that like when I first came into this, because like I also feel still like I am very much a baby voice actor, but like it can feel really overwhelming, right? Like you have all these resources and that's great. Like it can feel like, oh, there's so much stuff, but seriously, just take it one thing at a time. Make a Twitter, go follow the people here, follow some of the people in the chat and see who they talk to. See the casting calls that come up. If you get cast in something, connect with those voice actors. Just keep doing it, and sooner or later you will find that so much stuff. You will find all of the resources, and it can be scary at first, but the only way you can fail at it is not doing it. So just go for it.
Just to highlight what you said, make a Twitter. If you're
Yes.
not in LA,
Make a Twitter.
Make a Twitter.
Because that's how you connect with people. If you're in
Yes.
LA, you can meet people. Well, in the pandemic, but like, you know what I mean. Just make a Twitter and like connect.
Like, high key, I live in the middle of nowhere. There is basically no voice acting stuff in Winnipeg. I do voice acting full time. Like, you can do it. You can find stuff in Twitter, please. Twitter is such a great place to do it.
Anybody else? I think we've covered it.
Sam, do you have anything to say for starting out queer talent that are looking into maybe rep?
I think such a big question.
True.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't even necessarily, I would say just the little things matter and its consistency over time. And I know that's more just general to every voiceover talent that I work with that I think is trying to get in it. You have to be, I would say the one warning label I want to put on Twitter is that it can feel like everyone is successful all the time. And that is so not the case at all. And so you have to be very prepared to see other people succeed and relish in their success, and also understand that they worked hard for it. And for every booking that you see, there were hundreds of auditions that they did not book. So just keep that in mind, please, as you join Twitter and get involved in this community, because it is important to join it, and it is also important to be aware of that.
90% in years of our work, none of you will ever see.
Yeah.
And you just got to keep doing it. You got to be consistent.
Yep. So true. Gang, this has been an amazing night. And I think the group, based upon what I've been seeing in the chat, the group has learned so much. Huge thanks to all of you for giving of your time tonight, and a massive thanks to Kaylee Mckee for putting this all together. Kaylee, thank you. This was just so great.
Thank you.
I threw the link in the Discord for nope. I threw the link in the chat to our Discord if you'd like to join it. You can also find the link to it on our Instagram page, QueerVox Academy. Yeah, and check out the Halp Network for all of their panels. They do some amazing educational panels about all sorts of stuff. I know they have one on PCAP, and that's performance capture, coming up. So yeah, tune into all of that. All right. Thanks, gang. This has been amazing.
Thank you, everyone. So awesome. I hope we helped.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a good night.